What's up, everybody? Daniel Rock08 back again on our video. And since it's WrestleMania season, we're going to do a special video here. And this is going to be the best and the worst match at each and every single WrestleMania there ever was. From WrestleMania's 1 all the way up to last year's WrestleMania of 33. This was kind of hard to pick the best and the worst. There's a lot of WrestleManias out there that had so many incredible matches. To pick the absolute finest match was difficult. And on the flip side, there are a few bad WrestleManias where picking the worst match was difficult. And the ones that were very good had a lot less bad matches. Now, there were some WrestleManias that were obvious. Obviously, the best match was this match. And the obvious worst match of this WrestleMania is obviously this match. However, this wasn't too easy to do. But we're going to start it off right now. WrestleMania 1. The best match at WrestleMania 1 is the tag team match, the main event. Hulk Hogan and Mr. T versus Paul Orndorff and Roddy Piper. This was the marquee match. This is the match where 20,000 some people paid a ticket to Madison Square Garden for WrestleMania to watch for WrestleMania. It is a good tag team main event. Piper does a great job to hide Mr. T's uh, very big weaknesses. Hogan's a megastar. Piper's a megastar. This is just a fine tag team match. The worst match at WrestleMania 1, Beefcake versus David Sammartino. This match was dog piss. You know, a lot of people, when you talk about a guy who was pushed to the moon because of who his father was or who his brother was or whoever the fuck, looked no different than David Sammartino. Good God, they pushed this guy kind of hard. But in this match, he is completely overshadowed by Bruno, his father. And why wouldn't he be overshadowed? David Sammartino fucking sucked. And this match was bad. WrestleMania 2. This was a tough WrestleMania to pick the best match because this show overall fucking sucked. But the best match was the British Bulldogs versus the Dream Team of Beefcake and Greg Valentine. I don't know anyone who would come up with that Dream Team, but this was a fantastic tag team championship match. Ooh, when you look at the most forgettable matches of all time in WrestleMania history, this is it. And this is the finest match you're going to find. And it's at WrestleMania 2, a WrestleMania that was very piss poor. On the flip side thing, finding the worst match was hard to do because a lot of matches fucking sucked. I would go with the boxing match. Sure, you could pick Jake Roberts versus George Wells, Velvet McIntyre and Fabulous Moolah. There were some other stinkers in there. Adrian Adonis versus Uncle Elmer is also a good pick. But I picked the boxing match just because it's Mr. T. It's Roddy Piper. Why couldn't you did something better than that? This was just a dog shit match. One of the worst matches Piper ever had. This is just a piss poor match. WrestleMania 3. Randy Savage versus Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. It is one of the finest matches in WrestleMania history. A top 5 greatest WrestleMania matches of all time. But I would also like to say Hogan versus Andre the Giant, for what it brought to the table and how that was the match that 93,000 people pay to see, no matter what that stupid Mark wants to say. No matter what he wants to say, yes, it was 93,000. So a lot of people like Al Snow, who says Hogan versus Andre is the best match, I can agree with. However, Steamboat Savage is that once in a generation type of a match. It's such a remarkable match, such a memorable match. And for those huge wrestling fans at the time, this is the match that a lot of people can remember and a lot of people love. I would say Hogan Andre brought everyone to the Silverdome, but it was Savage versus Steamboat that blew them away. And it was that match that kept the fans coming back for more. For the worst match, Bundy, Hillbilly Jim, and the Midget match. This match, I get a kick out of this match because it is funny as hell. I'm not making fun of midgets, but this is a funny match because of Hillbilly Jim and how awesome he is. So happy to see him in the Hall of Fame. This is a bad match, but it's the worst match of WrestleMania. However, just because it's the worst match of WrestleMania, WrestleMania 3 is a fine, stellar WrestleMania. Top 5 WrestleManias. And say this is the worst one. It's really, honestly, just the weakest link. Next up, Randy Savage versus Ted DiBiase. My choice for the best match at Boring Mania 4. I mean, WrestleMania 4. Savage once again steals the show at WrestleMania. You could have picked his match with Greg Valentine as well. This was a fantastic showing of Randy Savage. A good match to end an otherwise boring show. Savage DiBiase. The worst match, Ultimate Warrior versus Hercules. Good God, this was a stinker. Not much to say. Moving on. WrestleMania 5. For the third time in a row, I chose another Savage match. And it's the Mega Powers exploding. Hulk Hogan versus Randy Savage. In my personal opinion, this is the best build-up to a main event of WrestleMania, bar none. No other storyline heading into WrestleMania captivated an audience like the Mega Powers explode. This is, from a storyline and from a build-up standpoint, the best main event there ever was in WrestleMania history. The Mega Powers explode. What more could you want? This is a spectacular match. A top 15 in my opinion. For the worst, there were a lot of stinkers at WrestleMania 5. It's a lot like WrestleMania 4. It's very boring. In fact, a lot of matches at WrestleMania 4 and 5, I get confused with the when and where they happened. I went with the Roju brothers versus the Bushwhackers, although the only reason why I picked this one over Bobby Heenan and the Rooster Cock-a-doodle-doo is because at least that match went a minute. This was more like 3 minutes. Rojus versus Bushwhackers, one of the worst matches in WrestleMania. Moving on up, WrestleMania 6, the obvious choice, Hulk Hogan versus the Ultimate Warrior. It's one of those WrestleManias where the best match is the obvious choice. Hogan versus Warrior. One of the finest main events of all time. This is a match, when you're looking at it, you think this match would suck. But this match is just, it really shows you the incredible star power that Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior possessed. Because quite honestly, they could have had a bad match and nobody would have fucking cared. But this match is so good because it captivates an audience. This is a match that captivates a generation. And this is one of those matches that gets fans into wanting to be a wrestler, to want to be a WWE superstar. And I bet you when Edge was there live in the Skydome to witness Hogan Warrior, this was probably the moment where he wanted to be a WWE superstar. The worst match, Boss Man Akeem. Just a bad match between the Twin Towers. The Twin Towers explode. Woo! Should not have said that. Ooh, bad memories. But, I mean, wrestling-wise, this is just horrible. One of the worst matches ever. WrestleMania 7. Man, Randy Savage, he was like Mr. WrestleMania back in the day. Before Shawn Michaels was coined Mr. WrestleMania, I would say Randy Savage was Mr. WrestleMania. Once again, he had the best match at WrestleMania. Randy Savage versus the Ultimate Warrior. This is the finest Warrior match. One of the best Savages matches. One of the best WrestleMania matches you're going to find. A top 15 in my opinion. fantastic match. WrestleMania 7 is one of my favorite WrestleManias. It's an underrated WrestleMania, one of the most underrated WrestleManias. Finding the worst match was kind of hard to do because even some of the worst matches on some of the matches on here are very much squash matches. They only last a minute. Um, there's a few matches you can put on here, but I went with Tenryu, Kato, and Demolition only because of how big Demolition had fallen from the previous WrestleManias. I mean, from WrestleMania 4, 5, and 6, they were the tag team champions. They were on top of the tag team mountain. They were the tag team champions, for fuck's sakes. And to get squashed out by this Japanese tag team that no one knows, and they get squashed out in like 2 or 3 minutes in this boring match that makes no sense. Demolition, what a fall from grace. The previous 3 WrestleManias, they were the tag team champions. And here they are, and then they're basically shit on Vince McMahon's shoes. And that's why I picked that match to be the worst. Next up for WrestleMania 8, man, Randy Savage, Mr. WrestleMania. Randy Savage versus Ric Flair. This is actually the 5th match I picked for Randy Savage. Randy Savage versus Ric Flair. It's the best match at WrestleMania 8. You could also went with Bret Hart versus Roddy Piper. Definitely a number 2, strong number 2. I liked WrestleMania 8 a lot. It had a lot of great matches. But Savage versus Flair, I mean, come on. It's one of the best WWE Championship matches there is. And one of the best stories, even though it's a little vanilla. Ric Flair saying that Ms. Elizabeth was his versus before Randy Savage. Very good stuff, though. The worst, I went with Owen Hart versus Skinner. Probably the most forgettable match. One of the most forgettable matches in WrestleMania history. It was in the dead spot. Nobody fucking cared. This was long after Savage and Flair and before Hogan Sid. Just a forgettable match. Nothing more to say about it. WrestleMania 9. A lot of people hate WrestleMania 9, and a lot of people think it's the worst WrestleMania of all time. Honestly, in my opinion, I think it's an underrated WrestleMania. I liked WrestleMania 9 a lot. A lot. There's just so many quirky things about it that brings a smile to my face. But the best match, it's Shawn Michaels versus Tatanka for the Intercontinental Championship. Honestly, it's a fine match. I liked it a lot. Headstringers versus the Steiners, also a good match as well. The worst match, however, it was easy. Undertaker Giant Gonzalez was a giant piece of shit. One of the worst matches in Undertaker's career. It's easily the worst match that Undertaker has had at WrestleMania. My God, this match sucked. And honestly, I can see why people do hate WrestleMania 9. Maybe it's because of this match, or maybe it's because of the ending. But, Taker Gonzalez, I can't defend that match, even though I love defending the hell out of WrestleMania 9. WrestleMania 10. To pick the ladder match or Bret Hart versus Owen, my goodness, this is such a tough pick. This is so hard to choose between Shawn Michaels and Razor or Bret Hart and Owen Hart. But to choose these 2 matches, it's almost impossible to do so. I went with the ladder match for the Intercontinental title because, again, it's one of those matches that just captivates an audience. And where the ladder match is now is insane of how it started back here to where it is now. This wasn't the first ladder match by any stretch of the imagination, but this was the first big mainstream ladder match. This is the one that really starts it all. It's a very different ladder match. There's not a whole lot of high spots. It's more of a battle to get to the ladder. But my goodness, it's one of the finest matches, a top 5 WrestleMania match. But to pick this over Owen versus Bret Hart, which is another top 5 or top 10 WrestleMania matches, is really tough to do. But it just edges it out just a tiny bit. The worst, Bam Bam and Luna Vachon versus Doink and Dink the Clowns Are Us. Just a boring, piss poor, nothing special match. They try to be silly with this. This match has that. It's one of those new generation type matches. You know what? You know what I mean? Like, you have Shawn Michaels versus Razor and Brett versus Owen and so on and so forth. But then you get one of those new generation type matches where it's the opposite. It's trying too hard to be funny and it's ridiculous and it's just stupid. Okay? And that's what that was. The best match at WrestleMania 11. Oh, God. WrestleMania 11 is easily the worst WrestleMania of all time. It's not even fucking close. And anyone who says it's WrestleMania 9, you're an idiot. You don't know what you're talking about. The best match at WrestleMania 11 is, in my opinion, Bam Bam Bigelow versus Lawrence Taylor. Why did I pick this match over, say, I don't know, Shawn Michaels versus Diesel? Because Shawn Michaels Diesel is the most overrated WWE Championship match there is at WrestleMania, besides the Iron Man match, but I agree with that one. That match is overrated. Shawn Michaels tried doing everything possible to make Diesel look stupid because, you know, they are best friends, and that's what best friends do. They make each other look stupid. But the possibilities you have with that match is insane. You could have did with best friends turn bitter enemies. How Shawn's jealous of Diesel because Diesel got to the title first and he's the one that brought him in. Instead, they went with, where in the world is fucking Pamela Anderson? But with Bam Bam Lawrence Taylor, I was so impressed. Every time I watch this match, I am so impressed by the performance that Lawrence Taylor had. And I am so impressed by how big of a talent that Bam Bam was. He is such an underrated talent, Bam Bam was, and is deserved to be a Hall of Famer. If anyone needs a reason to put Bam Bam in the Hall of Fame, this is the match. Bam Bam made Lawrence Taylor look like $1 billion. This is the finest wrestler versus celebrity match you're going to find. Bam Bam Lawrence Taylor is the only match at WrestleMania 11 that didn't piss me off. The worst match, to pick the worst match, my God, I could have went with anything. I could have went with the opener. I could have went with Undertaker Bundy. I could have went with Shawn Michaels Diesel because of how much it's not about them and how much it's about Pamela Anderson, Jennifer McCarthy, and all the celebrities. But I went with Bret Hart versus Bob Backlund to be the worst match at WrestleMania 11. And honestly, in my opinion, this is the worst match I've ever seen Bret Hart in. And this is a top 15 worst matches at WrestleMania. To sum this match up, it's an I-XVII match, basically. And it sucked a big one. Last thoughts on this match? All I gotta say is, sorry about the rant. Moving on. WrestleMania 12. It's obvious. The Iron Man match. Bret Hart versus Shawn Michaels for the WWF Championship. This is one of those matches where everyone knows everything about this match. A lot of people in a lot of top tier WWE superstars look back and say, this is the match that got them into the business. This is the match that drew their inspiration. And I can't complain. This is a fun match. I think it's a little bit overrated. I prefer other Iron Man matches like Triple H versus The Rock. But the best match is hands down the Iron Man match. To pick the worst match for WrestleMania 12, it was a little tough because there's a lot of good things about this show. I went with the Ultimate Warrior versus Hunter Hearst Helmsley. It was a squash match. But even this match, if you are the biggest Triple H hater of all time, if you hate Triple H's guts, this could be one of your favorite matches ever. With that being said, it's just one of those cases where this is the obvious weakest link. For WrestleMania 13, it's the obvious choice, Bret Hart versus Stone Cold Steve Austin, the submission match. Again, it's arguably the greatest match in WrestleMania history, let alone the best match at this WrestleMania. In fact, if it wasn't for this WrestleMania, it might be the worst match at WrestleMania if it wasn't for this match. Again, once in a generation type match. Arguably the greatest match of all time in WrestleMania history. I mean, come on. The blood from the Stone Cold Steve Austin is just one of the most iconic visuals in WrestleMania, and it's just burned on everyone's mind. For the worst match, Rocky Maivia versus the Sultans. To see the differences between Steve Austin and The Rock and this state in 1997, my goodness, you can see that, my God, Steve Austin is easily going to be a main event superstar. And looking at Rocky Maivia here, looking at The Rock here, you can see that a lot of people didn't have faith in him. The company was starting to lose faith in him. This match sucked. And honestly, Rocky Maivia probably wasn't going to go anywhere. So the differences between Steve Austin and The Rock at this stage, before we get to SummerSlam, before everything changes, is incredibly different. And I brought that up for later on when I talk about 15. The best match at WrestleMania 14. This was a tough one, like 10. There's two very good matches. Actually, WrestleMania 14 entirely is a great WrestleMania. There's hardly any bad matches. Undertaker versus Kane, Stone Cold Steve Austin versus Shawn Michaels. To pick between the two, for me anyways, was incredibly difficult. I love both matches to death. Undertaker versus Kane is the match that got me into loving wrestling. And Shawn Michaels, Steve Austin, the guts, the glory, the pain and suffering that both men had to endure during this match, because both men had conflicting injuries, with Steve Austin with the neck injury and Shawn Michaels going to leave soon because of his back injury, is nothing short but amazing in both men in all cases here. I went with Undertaker versus Kane because I'm a biased motherfucker. I cannot believe that people cannot believe that people think this match is overrated. This match, fuck you. It's one of my favorite matches of all time. It's a top 10 favorite Undertaker matches in my opinion. I love the shit out of Undertaker versus Kane. It's my pick for the best match at WrestleMania 14. For the worst match, this is one of the cases where the weakest link is the obvious choice. The weakest link was the Tag Team Battle Royale. Just a forgettable Battle Royale. The only thing notable is how hot Sunny looked. Nothing more to talk about. Moving on up. WrestleMania 15, the Raging Climax. Another case where the obvious choice is obvious. The best match on this card was Stone Cold Steve Austin versus The Rock. And talking back to WrestleMania 13 and how I said that the differences at WrestleMania 13 between Stone Cold and The Rock were completely different. You knew Steve Austin was going to be a big-time main event superstar. But when you look at Rocky Maivia, you didn't think he was going to be a main event player. Hell, you would think that he would be kind of like a Mark Merrow maybe, or maybe something like that, where they get the rocket push, but something happens, the crowd's not buying into them, they get overshadowed by other people, they get lost in the shuffle, and they get completely forgotten about. But my God, the differences that a year can make. The differences a year can make. Here we are at WrestleMania 15, and both men are on top of the world. Easily the best match at WrestleMania, one of the finest matches at WrestleMania. And dare I say, Steve Austin versus The Rock at WrestleMania 15 is the best match these two had in their trilogy of matches. I don't care what anyone says. That match at WrestleMania 17 is also overrated. The worst match, yes, WrestleMania 15 sucked, the big one. But Undertaker Boss Man Hell in a Cell match was the obvious choice for me. Pissed me off still. The worst Hell in a Cell match, one of the worst Undertaker matches of all time, one of the worst Undertaker WrestleMania matches. And also, this doesn't look good for the Big Boss Man either. Seeing the visual of him getting hanged at WrestleMania and knowing that he's been gone for 14 freaking years, that doesn't sit well. Okay? It just doesn't. WrestleMania 16. The obvious choice is obvious. It's the triangle ladder match. Edge and Christian, the Dudleys, and the Hardy Boys. My goodness, this match was a spot fest of biblical proportions, but it's one of those matches where they work the spot fest to it a T. I talk about the ladder match from WrestleMania 10. The differences between the WrestleMania 10 ladder match and the WrestleMania 2016 ladder match here are two completely different ladder matches. The evolution of the ladder match from 10 to 16 is baffling. To see a battle to the ladder, two men battling to the ladder, to now six men, anything goes, six guys putting their bodies on the line, doing all sorts of crazy shit. It's insane. The ladder match, it's the easy choice. The worst match, also an easy choice, the cat fight. Terry Runnels versus the cat. Just a shit match. And I also like to say, wow. You know, I'm not the biggest fan of the women's division right now. I think they shove it down our throats a little too hard. Whatever you want to call me, fuck yourself. But to see them go so far away from where they are now to here, it's incredible. It's insane, the differences that have came along between here at 2000 and now. It's insane. With that being said, this is a bad match. And this match is honestly Moolah versus Mae Young in the grand scheme of things. WrestleMania 17, to pick the best match at WrestleMania 17 was the toughest choice because you could have went with anything. Steve Austin versus The Rock, even though I think it's overrated. Undertaker versus Triple H, even. Vince versus Shane. There's a lot of matches. Angle, Benoit. But once again, I went with the Triangle Ladder match. The TLC, the Tables, Ladders, and Chairs match. Edge and Christian, the Dudleys, and the Hardys. For the second year in a row, in the second ladder match in a row, they steal the show and had the finest match you're ever going to find. You take everything they did at WrestleMania 16 the year prior, you throw in chairs, you throw in ladders, you throw in Lita and Spike and Rhino, you get Edge to spear Jeff off of the 20-foot ladder in midair. They took everything from WrestleMania 16 and bumped it into a notch into the stratosphere. And it's insane. I didn't think that they could have toppled themselves. You don't think you can topple yourself at that WrestleMania 16 with that match, but they did. And the fact that they managed to do so is the reason why I picked that match over so many other stellar matches. The worst match at WrestleMania 17, I mean, to choose the worst match at WrestleMania 17 is almost baffling. But I went with the six-man tag team match with APA, Taz, and the Right to Censor. It's the worst just because it's the most forgettable. Anyways, I'm Dana Rock 08, and that was part one of my best and worst match of each and every single WrestleMania. It's hard to believe that WrestleMania 17 is now the middle point of WrestleMania franchise, but hey, man, goodness gracious. Anyways, part two will come up soon enough, and I'll catch you next time for that. I'm Dana Rock 08. Goodbye.